Welcome back to another Sabbath School lesson. This is going to be over the book of Genesis once again. This is going to be lesson 2. Last week we did the story of creation. This week we're going to be in Genesis chapter 3, which is going to be the fall of humanity. So let's go ahead and dive right into this by going to the memory verse. It says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So we're going to kind of mesh a lot of these days together because the story basically just tells the chronological order of Genesis chapter 3. So just read Genesis chapter 3 and you'll have basically the entire Sabbath school lesson. But at a high level, this starts off basically with Revelation chapter 12 and verse 7 through 9. You should just kind of brief over it a little bit. Satan is referred to this old serpent that basically is referred to in Genesis. So they're connecting two books of the Bible together to basically say that this same person, the same creature is in Revelation, and he was cast out of heaven and is now making war with God's people and also God himself. And he's a great deceiver. In the context of saying that Satan is this huge deceiver, you also have the idea that Satan is also a real being. The author really wants to get that across to you. Many people think Satan is this guy with like a pitchfork and fire everywhere, going around sticking you, everywhere. And it's really not like that. He's an actual being like you and me, and he really does have a problem with you, and he has a problem with me and God. And so the story that we're going to look at, kind of moving from Sunday into Monday and on, is going to be this scene of the serpent being at a tree and Eve engaging with this serpent. So she comes over to the tree and engages with this serpent, and the serpent tells her that she's not really going to die, as God says, if she takes this fruit and eats from it. And so she's like, hey, you know what? This fruit looks good. It seems like it could make me wise. She takes it, she eats it, she gives it over to her husband, and therefore, as you see, mankind fell. And so in the context of this, the author really wants you to kind of explore really two main things. Number one, Satan deceives by using the idea of immortality of the soul. On the other hand, he deceives by using the idea that you can be like God. So two giant principles here of the way Satan likes to go about deceiving. And the question that the author wants to pose to you is, in what ways are you being tempted to have this idea that you can be immortal, that you won't fully ever surely die? And in what way are you being tempted that you're like being God in your own life, right? So explore those things, have a conversation about that. It's really interesting stuff. Don't spend too long on it because it starts to get really juicy as you go into Tuesday. So Tuesday is going to now take a little bit of a spin. When Adam and Eve realize that they now have been naked and they've messed up, they hear the footsteps of God coming in the garden. And all of a sudden they make a run for it. And God is calling out to them, where are you? They realize what happens. And Adam speaks out to him and says, hey, I was afraid, because I'm naked. And God is like, well, what do you mean you're naked? Who told you that you're naked? Did you eat from the tree that I told you not to eat from? And Adam is like, well, it's the woman that you gave me. She's the one that gave me the fruit and I ate of it. Now notice what happens here when he says that, because God stops the conversation between Adam and God. And he moves on to Eve and asks Eve what she did. And then Eve is like, well, it wasn't merely me, it was the serpent. The serpent, gave it over to me and I ate it. And so God stops the conversation with Eve and moves on to the serpent. And the lesson that you really find there, especially from Tuesday, it's a huge lesson, so don't rush through it. When you have this God that's trying to interact with Adam and Eve, they keep blaming other people around them. And God moves on from them because at that point, there's no point to even have a conversation with them. There's nothing that God can tell them to help them realize something about themselves, because they've now placed the entire responsibility of everything they've done on someone else. So at that point, when you play the blame game, the aspect of you having this relationship and going deeper with God becomes a major problem, because God cannot dialogue with you to show you anything about yourself and what he wants to be in your life, because you're not open to even looking at yourself at all. You just want to put everything on other people. All right. So that's Tuesday, a really powerful lesson. Make sure you don't miss it. Wednesday and Thursday is basically just going to kind of give you a brief overview of, like, kind of, I don't want to say the punishments, but yeah, kind of in some ways the punishments that were handed out or the judgments that were handed out after Adam and Eve fell. So essentially, here you want to, and also the punishment handed off to the serpent, and God is going to create enmity in between the two. One thing that you want to make sure that you understand about Wednesday and Thursday specifically is going to be this aspect of God causing pain in childbirth, or talking to Adam and saying, "Cursed is the ground because of you." Basically, Adam was supposed to work the ground. You know, obviously, Eve is supposed to have children. These are natural gifts that God had given to mankind to work, to have children. But God says, "I'm going to cause it to be a struggle for you." So the result of sin is that you're going to have a struggle doing the natural things of God. And that's one of the key things that Wednesday and Thursday is going to bring out. So think about what are the natural things that you could do that are good things, like have babies, do good things for other people. What are natural good things of God that you have trouble doing? And that's basically the context of Wednesday and Thursday. That's the result of sin. Okay, so let's transition into one profound thought here that you may not have thought of a little bit before. So I want you to go back to the scene of when, specifically when God is approaching Adam and Eve after they sinned. Once sin has entered the world, for the first time, Adam and Eve, they misinterpret the approach of God. They misinterpret basically what the presence of God is going to do to them. They freak out and they get afraid. Before, they would have been fine with God. They would have probably ran to him like a father, or, you know, as you might run to your mom or whatever. But what you have here is a scene of which they're running immediately away. And this is where sin messes up our mentality. When God approaches us in our own life, we oftentimes think of it as offensive. The approach of God and the movement of God in your life can initially seem like something bad. And all of a sudden you're freaking out and you're not wanting to be around it. Let me give you an example. It's kind of like when you pray for something, right? And the presence of God is coming into your life and you're praying for something hard, you really want it, and everything gets worse. And you're just like, well, why is everything getting worse when I pray? And you're just like, oh, God isn't helping me. And sometimes we misinterpret the initial approach of God, because when God initially comes into our life in a situation after you pray, things might get worse. Something may seem like it's going wrong, but sometimes that's just the approach of God to ready to come in and make it right. God was initially coming to talk to Adam and Eve about the issue that they had, the sin, but he was coming to provide an actual plan of salvation for them so that they can be saved again. He was actually approaching them to help them, but his initial approach to them looked like something offensive or bad. And when you go through things in your life in which you see that things get worse before they get better, but you're praying with God, sometimes it's the same way with Adam and Eve. It's that initial approach of God seems like something is about to go wrong. I can't take it anymore. But a lot of times, if you stick it out and stay with God, there's something better behind that. So I just want to let you know that sometimes we tend to make this run forward when the presence of God approaches, but that's because we misinterpret the approach of God. We misinterpret God's movement in our own life. So again, look around again how your week's been going, your year's been going, and I kind of ask the question, am I misinterpreting the movement of God in some area of my life? Maybe something doesn't seem to be working out and you're praying for it, but maybe that's God's initial approach and there's something better that's about to happen. So just keep that in mind, and I'll see you on the next lesson.